Katy England, welcome to Show Studio. I'm going to start with a question that you've probably been asked so many times, but I'm sure it's a wonderful story, which is about how you first met Lee McQueen, because I've read that it was in a bead shop.
Yes, yeah, the famous story. I'm trying to think before the bead shop. I think that I went to see his collection when he showed it in a hotel, and it could have been the Savoy Hotel, and he'd never done a show, but there were like a few rails where young designers showed their things, and I remember very vaguely, because I don't have a very good memory unfortunately, but I remember him talking me through his collection, and I was really intrigued by him. It went very quickly, and it was very, it was just a brief moment. And then I also went to see his show at the Café de Paris, which I sat in the audience of and thought was incredible and amazing. And I can remember walking out of the Café de Paris on my own thinking, wow, that was incredible. I'm feeling quite elated and thinking, well, if there was anyone I'd want to work with, it would be him. And then the bead shop story is that I was in a bead shop called Els and Farrier, which was off Carnaby Street. And he was also there, and he just said, "Oh, are you Katy England?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, should we go for a cup of tea? I'd like you to style my show." And I just said, "Well, I don't really know what styling shows, what does that mean? I've never done that before," because I hadn't even assisted anyone styling a show. And he just said, "Oh, we can do it, we'll just have a go." So that was it. I said yes.
Would you have approached him at some point, do you think, if that hadn't happened?
Probably not. No, I'm a bit shy like that. So no, I like to think it was meant to be. Yeah. And I know that he, when I worked at the Mail on Sunday, I would go to the Paris fashion shows, and I'd sort of hang out with the students, because I was quite young and I didn't really know the fashion editors and I didn't really know the scene, so I was a bit intimidated. So I felt more comfortable with the students from St. Martin's, and sometimes I'd help to get them. I might have 2 tickets and I'd help them to get them into a show and stuff. And I can remember Lee once told me that he used to see me at these shows because they'd all go together to try and get in, the students. And I think he remembered certain things about the way I looked. Like I wore this coat that he was fixated by, because it was an old nurse's coat. It was quite military, and it had some badges on the sleeves that had been unpicked, but the stitching was still there. And it was really well fitted. It was like a 1940s shape, and it had amazing shoulders, and it was nipped in at the waist and it went to the knee. So the proportion of it was beautiful. Yeah. And he had his eye on this coat, you see. He'd seen the coat.
He'd seen the coat before he'd seen it.
Yeah, and things like that, he just was attracted to things.
And he ended up borrowing the coat for a while, yes.
The coat's now gone, it was lost, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
Tell me, because the first show you worked on was the Birds, that's right, isn't it? So tell me about the process between meeting him and the Birds, and how it, because as you say, you hadn't styled a show, so how did it kind of come together?
It was all very higgledy-piggledy, really, because I remember going, Lee was working downstairs underneath Phillips, where Phillips had the hat shop in Elizabeth Street. Yeah. And Izzy had given him a little space in the basement, and it was tiny. And he was there with Andrew Groves, who was his boyfriend, and they were sewing on the machines, these clothes. And it was like very dark, and he'd show me a few things, and I'd be like, "Oh wow, that's amazing." And I'd keep paying little visits to this, to where he's working. And then as it got nearer the time, I just remember we knew we were doing it at Bagley's warehouse, and I guess I must have coordinated the hair and the makeup, because Val Garland was doing makeup and Eugene Suleiman was doing hair, and those people were the ones I'd started with in my career. And also Eugene had a bit of a relationship with Lee, I think, already. So I can remember that kind of booking them, but the model situation was really random, in that we just had to sort of get who was available. And obviously Izzy had said he'd made contacts with Tina Larkonen and Plum Sykes, so they were in the show, and a few people he knew were in the show. But then I had to book some models, and I can remember having to confirm them on a fax machine at the local library, and we hardly had enough money for the faxes. And it was Friday night and the show was on Sunday, and Sunday morning, I think, actually Sunday must have kind of been the morning, it must have been Sunday night, and I had to try and get the faxes done before the library closed with hardly any money, and it was just kind of chaotic. And then Trina Avocado was my assistant at the time, and we had to go in Trina's car and pick the clothes up from the basement ourselves and take them to the venue ourselves. You know, it was that small and that, you know, scrappy, I suppose.
It seems like already at that point you were far more than a stylist, because I was going to ask when that point came where the roles became a little bit more blurred, as they always do, actually, I think, in good collaborative relationships. But from the start, was it kind of like you were just...
Yeah, because it wasn't that clear for me what a stylist was anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I'd done photographic work, but not this work behind the scenes and show work.
Yeah.
And I was trained in fashion, so I felt instinctively drawn. I really loved the process, the earlier part of the process of, you know, helping someone with the creative on the clothes and stuff. So I don't know, but Lee was very much like that. He always used to say, you know, anyone can make the tea around here, meaning he can make the cup of tea, or anyone, or, you know, it was kind of welcome to everyone's ideas, and very collaborative, I think. And I think that's always great when, you know, he liked all the young people around, and, you know, everybody speaking up and giving their point of view. He always kind of encouraged that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, I interviewed some designers now and some stylists now, and often it seems like some people, they're looking for a cheerleader, they're looking for someone to say, yeah, that's great, we'll do it like this, and kind of keep spirit up. But you say he always wanted you to be honest. Do you think that was one of the things, like always kind of raising your voice and saying...
Oh yeah, I think that's what you have to be. I don't think you can't last very long if you're not. I mean, what can you give is your honest opinion. Yeah. You know, and that's what people want. And if they don't like it, then it's okay. It's just like you find a way. You know, there would often become a point when Lee would know I didn't particularly like it, but he felt really strongly about it, and that was the way it was. Yeah, it's fine. I don't think you can get very far if you just agree with everything.
Yeah, very true. And tell me about the Birds, because you've kept saying that that's your favourite show. Is that still the case?
I think it's just such a sentimental, emotional memory, you know, because it was the first show I'd ever done, and I hadn't imagined what it was like before. I didn't know what it was like backstage at a show. So to see all the girls come together with this amazing hair and makeup and this adrenaline and this excitement that happens just before they're about to go on, I think it was just like blew me away. That this, you know, I was so excited by it, and I think that just, because it was so emotional, it stayed with me, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it must be interesting though, because a lot of your, you know, you were talking before about being at the shows, a lot of your peers and colleagues and even just friends in the industry, they must have a very different view. They were on the other side of the show watching it come out. Is it sometimes strange, because when people talk a lot about McQueen shows, they talk about being there and the experiences, and your view must be so different, so you're almost, I guess you miss bits of history, but you're also there for them. Is that strange sometimes?
Yes, it is strange, because I often used to wish I could sit there and watch it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can absolutely imagine.
Because I thought it looked so great. You know, some of the really special ones, like the Voss, the box, and the mirror box, and then the Shalom being sprayed. And I just think that must have been phenomenal to see for the first time. and to have no idea what was going to happen, but to have that expectation that something was. And I think, he always wanted, we often showed in Gatliff Road warehouse, and he always wanted this. There was a sense of, you could feel the audience were a bit nervous, or it was quite an eerie place anyway. It was, and I think I felt that must have been amazing to experience that firsthand.
You never ever managed to run out.
No, oh my God,
Marion
no.
Newman said she managed it on a couple. I was really impressed.
No way. If you'd have seen what I was doing backstage, it was crazy.
So tell me more about being backstage and about sort of putting the shows together. Just tell me a little bit on the process of how it would work.
Well, I think often it was very complicated.
Yeah.
Because we were trying to achieve an awful lot, and it was one thing, the models come in for fittings and we get them looking great and we make the show order, but then it was actually, I don't know, we should perhaps think about a show in particular. There's so many complicated shows.
So many. So tell me about something like Voss, because that's such an iconic one.
Voss was relatively easy.
Was it? That surprises me.
Yeah, because it was one entrance, one exit.
Yeah.
And in a way, he wanted the girls to be quite free.
Yeah.
So
gave you a bit of flexibility, I guess.
I think the technicalities of Michelle Ollie in the box was another.
Tricky.
I think perhaps it was all about Michelle and how comfortable she was and what she wanted to do, and all of that, explaining that, and her because she had to use the breathing. I think it was quite hard in the breathing apparatus to sort of be okay and sit inside there while the whole show was going on. So I think that was probably the technical issues of Michelle that was the hardest ones of that show. But for example, the dance show in Paris, they shoot horses, don't they?
Deliberate.
That was really hard because we had to train models to dance, and in Paris the models are going from fitting to fitting, show to show, and you have a tiny amount of time with them, and we had to try and persuade the agencies that wasn't just a normal fitting, it was going to be a fitting that was going to take a few hours, and they couldn't get their heads around this. They just and it was probably very hard for Jess Hallett, because casting the show, she was the one that had to persuade everyone without almost telling them what we were doing as well. And then sometimes you found that obviously some girls could dance better than others, and so what should they be wearing because there was 3 sections, I think, to that show. So then you'd have to establish how you might have done the fitting for the clothes, but then they couldn't do the dancing properly. And
would you ever compromise on stuff like that, though?
Yes, I mean, it was always, we'd have to make decisions for the best, or, oh my God, what are we going to do? And sort them out. The Overlook was quite tricky because we had to cast ice skaters, and they were all quite small. Yeah. I don't know why, but for some reason the girls were tiny.
They're like ballet dancers.
So it was a little bit tricky to, obviously there's a reason we want to show clothes on girls who are over 5'9", because they look amazing, you know, and they look it's so much harder. When to make them look their ultimate best, and they were very little. I think we might have made the skirt shorter for them and everything, but anyway, they were okay because we didn't ask the models to ice skate. We just had a professional ice skating group, which was fine. But the snow was slightly touch and go coming into the box. I think the snow had to, whirl around at one point. And in the backstage, the big tube that was feeding the snow onto the outside, onto the catwalk, it came apart in the middle of the show.
Oh gosh.
And I remember I was like, oh my God, the snow was pouring into the backstage. So me and Miguel Androver, who was Lee's very good friend, and he was super tall. He I jumped on top of a chair. I got a chair and stood there holding the tube of snow back into where it should be. And he was holding me doing it, so we could.
Do you think people, they probably imagine a lot of glamour backstage?
There's absolutely no glamour. I think there might have been a fire as well.
Wasn't there one show where the clothes also got stuck at the airport for ages until like 2 hours before or something, or like a few hours before?
Yeah, I think it might have been something to do with our show in America.
Yeah.
Customs is always quite tricky.
Yeah.
But that was a very difficult one when we took a show to New York once, because we were just really out of sync.
Yeah, and everything's a different system.
We're used to our London scene, and we'd got quite comfortable with that and how it all slotted together. But
It's strange though, because it must have been, as much as you say it was very comfortable, and it's interesting because when we talk about it now, and I touched on this earlier, people, they love talking about McQueen shows and they love talking about being there, but I think it's important to remember that at the time, you know, not all the press was that praiseful. That must have been difficult, especially as a woman, because some of the stuff that was said about it was that it was misogynistic. And
well, when I started with Lee, I was in my 20s and he was a bit younger than me, and we didn't really care.
Yeah.
It was an amazing feeling, and I sometimes think that's something to do with being really young and perhaps not knowing what's out there and what it all means. And I felt that we had this kind of, we didn't care so much, and we were quite brave, and I encouraged Lee to do what he wanted to do, and we did it with the best intentions.
Yeah.
So if somebody said that they thought it was misogynistic, we couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because we'd never, I was there working with him on stuff, and he was surrounded by great women and his sisters and his family.
His mother, yeah.
And I knew his opinion about, I think now I'm trying to sort of, you look back on it, and I guess we both like really strong women.
Yeah. Strong,
tough-looking girls, maybe with great attitude, and perhaps that was a bit frightening to people, but it was very natural to me and to him, and I actually didn't read the papers and the press, because I thought why? I thought we're doing what we want to do, and we should do that, and I really didn't get involved with it, which is a very different way it is now, because it's so the opposite way around now. But back then, honestly, it sounds odd, but I didn't.
Did people ever say stuff directly to you? Did they ever challenge you on it, or?
No. But then I'm quite tucked away, I'm sort of like, wouldn't be. We spoke less about what we did, because there was, it's a different time. It's like you don't, people, you just kept yourself to yourself and get on with your work. And I don't know, we just sort of were excited and young and just sort of going for it. So
it's funny,
I don't feel we were particularly deterred.
Yeah.
Perhaps Lee might have been more upset than me at times, but I would try to ignore it.
Yeah. It's interesting, because some of the shows that I think people love the most, like, and I guess things like Le Poupée, or obviously Highland Drape, they were the most controversial. And do you, looking back, is there a certain irony in that? It must be strange to see how people talk about his work now. Oh yeah,
there's a lot. I can remember really negativity around him, and him being too aggressive, and it's really strange how people have just turned it all around. I mean, he did grow up as well, of course, and those were the early days, and someone matures, and learnt so much from the ateliers at Givenchy, and as the years go by, perhaps he softened as well. But there is an irony in it, because people didn't like it.
They didn't like it at the time. It's fashionable to like it now, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And tell me, so from the bead shop to the Birds, what was the point where you realised sort of that you'd become friends?
I think I was instantly attracted to him. I think he's a really charismatic guy. Super. Something about him, you meet people in life that you feel are quite special, and he had an amazing laugh. He was he had a great time. He was was super bright, loved fashion and clothes, but at the same time loved loved life and doing other things. So there was never a time where one day was the same.
Yeah.
You know, we'd go in the morning and go, oh, I'm bored, I don't want to do this, so let's go out. So we'd go out to find some inspiration, or go to a gallery, or go shopping for books, or going to Comme des Garçons, or whatever we were doing, you know. And you felt that fashion was he was so amazingly good at it. Yeah. He didn't actually have to think about it. Yeah. In terms of, you know, he came alive when he was presented with the girl and he was fitting something, and he focused, and he liked to work on the body. So I think that was really exciting for him, whereas to make him draw on the paper, I mean, he could do it on the paper, but perhaps that didn't hold as much excitement as really creating for real, you know. So how did that come around with the friends question? I think we just were. You meet someone and you click, and that's that.
And was it the same aesthetically? Was that same click? Because as well as, you know, obviously styling the show was a part of it, but as you kind of just inferred things like coming to him with references or ideas or things you'd seen, that must have, especially, you know, the more you work together, must have become a huge part of it. And
yeah, I think we did it. We did it very naturally. So we didn't get, you know, obviously at the time he was only designing McQueen, so it wasn't like we were under so much pressure. There was no pre-collections. He wasn't perhaps working at Givenchy by then. So he was only doing a collection every 6 months, and he also wasn't really producing it. So there was quite a lot of time at the beginning. Yeah. And I think we like the same similar things. Yeah. What can I say? You know, we have there's a similar strain of taste. Yes, it veers off in different places for each of us. We're not exactly the same. But I think what he liked was having somebody with him who was a woman who could talk about how they wanted to wear clothes, and how, you know, he loved going shopping and buying me things because he'd be excited and he'd probably want to wear it himself. Yeah. Like, I remember he bought me a beautiful Margiela jacket, because we were really into Margiela, and we still are. And he bought me this really old piece with a fantastic shoulder, and he just turned up with it because you know, he wanted to see somebody enjoying it and wearing it. And I think he liked perhaps the way I put it all together, you know. Yeah. So that was exciting. And he'd come buy me pairs of shoes and things like from Louis Vuitton, or
just turn up with
like crazy ones. And he bought me some Yves Saint Laurent ones once with big red cherries on the front that were just bonkers. But I think he wanted to see them come to life. And we liked the set, you know, we loved Vivienne Westwood, we loved Margiela, Helmut Lang, Obsessions. So it was nice, you know, you share that with somebody, and we just kind of bumbled around together.
And tell me a little bit, this is kind of on the slightly more sort of pragmatic, and maybe it's really hard to explain, but like, tell me about putting together a McQueen look and what to you it had to sort of embody to feel like McQueen. Because I think that's another interesting thing about his legacy, is how people have talked about aesthetic codes that define him, which maybe actually have missed out some of the more complicated or diverse things he did.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps we've all got our own interpretations of what we think is a McQueen look.
Absolutely.
I mean, I could say what I think is what should be a McQueen look for me is, I think there's a little bit of history in it, and obviously Victorian is something that he was really passionate about. There's a little bit of punk in it. There's a little bit of destruction or rebellion. There's an amazing silhouette and proportion in it. I think I was looking at the Widows of Culloden, that show recently, and I just was so impressed with it, because the cut of the clothes and the proportion of the dresses was just so beautiful and so right, and really flattering and really pretty at times. And you know, that show came a lot from the Highland Rate. It was like the sophisticated, grown-up version of the Highland Rate. And I just looked at it recently and thought how beautiful it was. And so I liked the proportion of that. I felt that was very McQueen in the way that there's a waist often, but the skirts, some of just the length of the skirts, you know, it's just all super flattering. So a bit of punk, the proportion, a bit of Victorian, like a great shoe with attitude, I think, but that should always apply.
In every story.
In everything. And then it just, you know, I guess, you know, you think about the heads as well a lot.
You do.
Because Philip did such amazing things, and perhaps that was such an important part of the Culloden show as well, because those birds are incredible. Just incredible. And feathers. Perhaps it's always got a bit of feathers on the outfit.
There's a little bit of lightness to it, isn't there, always. And was it, when he was designing, did you get to a point together where you would kind of style as he designed? Would that ever, I guess, kind of, I don't want to say design together, but would you say like, oh, we should put that with this?
I was there through all the fittings with him, and the process was built as he was fitting, and would often be about proportion and length and jacket length and sleeve length and size of collar.
Because I think that's so specific to what he does.
And you know, he'd like to have a second opinion about that, and what did I think? And I can remember, I think we had the dresses were quite long at the Widows of Culloden, and suddenly there was a decision in a fitting to cut them off short, and that was it. It made such a difference, and we all got excited then, because we could really feel it. And he would say, it was to, you know, he would want to help somebody to help him. So it'd be like, how about a belt? Oh, this needs a belt, or just playing around with putting things on the head, whether it was just a bit of lace you put on, so that we'd try to understand if we wanted a hat or what we wanted. And then he'd like me to sort of play around with the shoes, and he didn't really work so much from vintage clothes. Because I think he liked to cut his own proportions, and he could never find it exactly in vintage clothes. He was really interested in Vivienne Westwood, the way she cut things, and
but he didn't want to replicate it.
But he couldn't replicate it because he had his own thing so strong, and he always turned it into his own thing. And I would, you know, the only thing he took from vintage were techniques, like beautiful embroidery techniques, or certain detail on a sleeve, or pockets, or, you know, loads of little things like that. And then he would apply them to his shapes. But he was always intrigued, because I would wear a lot of Vivienne Westwood, and he'd be like, oh, let me see that, you know, and get a bit pissed off because I'd be wearing so much of it. But it was, you know.
It's funny that, you know, that notion of him sort of putting you in things and taking things that you were wearing, because it's a tag that I really hate, but I wonder how it feels when it's actively applied to you. Do you find it annoying when people call you a muse to him, or is that okay?
I don't ever think of that as I don't think of the word muse. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't really know what it is in terms of my job in fashion.
I guess when you're so busy and you're actually doing stuff.
I'm just there as a part of a team. Working with the designers and the design team and the shoe designers and the bag designers and the designer, and we're all trying to make something work. And that's a group of people, and I don't really think of myself like that. The only way is when you see, the only way you slightly feel it is if you might wear something important of theirs, and they like it coming to life on somebody. And they get excited by that, which you would.
Do you think he liked his clothes sometimes more on you than on other people?
No. No, because he had great people around him. He had Isabella, you know, Annabelle. Oh God, I could name millions that looked great. And this goes Bjork, you know, fantastic women. But he did. I think designers do get a buzz. I would, you know, if it was I'd made something and oh wow, this girl's walking along, she looks amazing in it. That's so exciting. So. Yeah, but you know, I think perhaps I always wore it in my own way a bit. So I don't know.
And tell me what might the decision to walk away?
I think it just was at one time so absorbing and so many shows and so many collections and menswear and Givenchy and pre-collections and it was really overwhelming.
It was a different thing then.
It was a different thing. And I think there was a point when I had been working with him full time, but I felt I was losing myself and I was losing...
And you needed that.
I think really, if you talk about a stylist, they bring things from the outside world. And they help to inspire and excite a designer and
give a new eye.
You know, give a new eye and say, oh, well, and also be very informed about what's going on in the outside world. Like, well, hang on a minute, we don't want to do that because I just saw that. And I think we should avoid that because it's been done or whatever, you know. So I felt that I wasn't working at my best because I was just in one place. And so much of our work on editorials and working with photographers and new makeup artists and hairdressers, it's all so inspiring. And it all feeds great, you know, you're fed by all of this stuff and then you bring it into your work with the designer and you feel you're giving them more. So I needed a bit of space and I think I wanted to do another magazine and Dazed and Confused magazine. So I stepped away a bit then and then I was just working a certain amount of days for him, but I worked every week for him, always. You know, through the beginning inspirations of collections all the way through to the show. So I just love, you know, the whole process. But why did I walk away in the end? I don't know.
Just the time.
I don't think I can answer that one.
Do you look back at the shows after you and still see yourself in them though? That's a really hard question, but
no, I don't see me in them anymore. No, no, definitely not. I think it's. I think I gave him a bit more reality of the street type of thing. When you look at a show like, I've forgotten the name, the one we first did in Paris with the Consergery, which was a beautiful, beautiful show.
So beautiful.
And there's parts of it that are very me. You know, when the schoolgirls came on and the rock schoolgirls and I felt that was a really, you know, that's what he wanted from me. And because it was very easy for him to get so historical and beautifully and so intricate detail and workmanship. And sometimes, you know, I think I might bring him back down to, well, how's it worn? Who's wearing it and how they're wearing it? And I was a bit, perhaps the reality side a little bit. So, I don't know. I didn't actually, it was when after I left, I couldn't look so much.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I've studied the shows so much after that because we have, you know, it's like such a long time with someone. It's quite a weird process to go through.
Yeah, absolutely.
To change that. And even now, it's only the V&A retrospective that has made me look very, very closely at the time he was in London and all the London shows and revisit all of that, and it's only really now that that's happened. So people don't always get the chance to analyse and look back on what they did, you know.
But, and as much as it's interesting that you say you don't see yourself in it, but do you see him in everything you do?
Yeah, I do see. I've learnt such a lot from him, and I was so privileged to be a part of it and to be right there with him and see this, and see his just amazing workmanship, and see firsthand. It was, I still can't believe how lucky I was, and yeah, I've learnt such a lot. It's still with me, you know.
I can imagine. Thank you, Katy.